Welcome to Astrologies in Astrology with a very, very, very special guest because I know him since decades because I was with him when he was an astrologer and he was delineated my personal horoscope, but that is decades ago. Professor Dr. Kocku von Stuckrad, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. Welcome.
And
Thank you to welcoming here.
you're quite welcome. And now we start with the legal problems and get rid of them. Copyright. I have only the right to publish the respective conversation uncut and unedited on freely accessible video platforms, no paywalls, and on my homepages. My guest, Professor Kocku von Stuckrad, has the right to shorten, edit, or add to the MP4 file which I will send to him via Swiss transfer as he wishes, and to publish it on his websites and video platforms according to his liking. Is that okay with you?
That's fine with me.
Very good. Now, we start with your parents because you were born in Kapanda, Ghana, and that has something to do with your parents, right?
Yes, indeed. I was born in Pandu, in Ghana, which is in the Volta region in Ghana. And my parents were working there. My father was a minister for the Protestant Church, Bremer Missionsgesellschaft. And yeah, it's a kind of missionary position that he had there, but they, even in the 1960s, they already said, okay, this is not missionary only, this is an exchange minister and a little bit different approach, but yet it was still in a kind of missionary colonial context. And yeah, after 2 years, I was born there, and that's why I have this not so common name in Europe. In Ghana, it's very common because every boy who's born on a Wednesday has the name Kocku, so every seventh boy. In Ghana, it's very common. So I spent my first 4 years in Ghana, which were, of course, even though you don't have really memories, concrete memories, but it's still a very important phase of your life, and I have a lot of emotional and physical memories of the place, and I still love to go back to Ghana regularly. And it also, of course, brought me into some context that has been with me for a long time, the questions about being exposed to Christianity, being exposed to colonialism, to alternatives to Christianity, and all these questions resonate with me ever since. Not that it was formed when I was 3, but it is, of course, something I grew up with, and that certainly has some influence on my own situated knowledge about these questions and the questions themselves that I ask.
So 4 years now, we are now in 1970. What happened then?
Then we went back to Germany,
Okay.
and I grew up in northern Germany. We ended up in a little town next to Oldenburg, which is close to the North Sea, close to Bremen in the north of Germany, and that's basically where I went to school. And yeah,
Was that Delmenhorst?
Delmenhorst was later, but
Oh,
Delmenhorst is also in that. Yeah,
okay.
it's
Okay.
close to Bremen, and I lived in Delmenhorst for a few years as well. But that was later, after my studies.
Okay, so you got into school, you got your Abitur, I suppose, and then you decided what to study. What was your consideration process? Did you know from the beginning, I have the Abitur, I can study? There's a gap between the Abitur and the beginning of the studies, I believe. So what was about that gap?
Yeah, one reason was my Zivildienst,
Okay.
my civil service, because I refused to go to the army, and therefore I had to do or did 2 years of civil service, and I did that in a psychosomatic part of a children's hospital in Oldenburg, and
Okay.
so these were 2 years of yeah, civil work. And then I moved together with my girlfriend at the time, and she started studying in Bonn.
That is
And
why
I
you.
moved with her, but
Okay.
I was open to, yeah, ideas about what I want to. I was interested in philosophy and maybe also in literature or in some other things, but I wasn't really decided. And in the beginning, I worked actually in Bonn as a in as a I worked in a store. We sold outdoor equipment and climbing gear and canoeing stuff and so on. So I worked there for full time for 2 years. And in Bonn, by accident, I saw that there is something that you can study that studies religion without being theology. And I I found out that religious studies was actually what I was really interested in. And by accident or by guidance, by whoever, um, I yeah, was living in Bonn, one of the places where you could study religious studies. And so I enrolled in the study of religion, vergleichende Religionswissenschaft, comparative religion. And also I studied philosophy and as a specialization, which you needed, Jewish studies.
Okay. I did study Religionswissenschaft in Hanover after I was retired. And the methodological development of the study of religion is different in the German language. It's Religionswissenschaft, and it's religious study in the American Anglo-Saxon spheres. When you started, uh, you started in 1990, right?
Something about that, yeah.
And that is 15 years before I started my religious studies in my PhD studies. And when I was in Hanover, there was Professor Antes and Dr. Gustav Adolf Schöner. You know both of them.
Yeah.
And well, Professor Antes was an undercover agent because he didn't confess that he was a phenomenologist. Gustav Adolf Schöner sort of undercover because it was difficult in 2005 to be a phenomenologist in the context of Religionswissenschaft. How did you in 1990 experience this change, this transformation of the field from phenomenology with Rudolf Otto and Mircea and how did you decide your personal view? Because if I look at your book, which we will talk later, Lilith, one could think there is an element of the holy in your personal views. We'll come back to that later. How did you experience the discussion in Bonn, and how did you decide what is your personal view on this? What is Religionswissenschaft?
Yeah, that's a good question and a huge topic, of course. And it was interesting when I studied in the 90s, 1990s, that there was a shift in the study of religion in general, and which was also very visible in Bonn in the program. And when you, for instance, consider uh, that when I did Introduction to the Study of Religion in the first year, we read Mircea Eliade as the basic text, The Myth of Eternal Return. That's the book we studied as this is the basic introduction to the study of religion. I mean, I teach these courses myself for, yeah, have taught them for 30 years now, or 20 years. And it would be quite strange to use this book anymore, and that was even the case in the 1990s. It's not the most intuitive choice of introduction, but that was one teacher, one instructor who was into this more phenomenological, comparative religion approach. But at the same time, the professors that worked in Bonn were very critical of this and approached religion from a different more historical and not phenomenological, understanding the sacred, the holy, das Heilige, like Rudolf Otto, was not so much a method in itself, but more a phase of the study of religion that you have to acknowledge, but not something you apply yourself today. And it was particularly Karl Hoheisel, who was very influential for my further development. And he was very interesting. He was maybe one of the first, and maybe the first in German university system who dared to talk about esotericism in his classes. And he was a good friend of Antoine Favre in Paris, who was one of the initiator of the academic study of esotericism. And Hoheisel was very open to all these topics that were quite controversial at the time. Like he did lectures on and seminars on topics like the history of the Anthroposophical Society. So anthroposophy as esotericism was one class we had with him. Another one was magic in monotheistic context. I still remember the title of that seminar. That was quite heretic at the time, that you put magic and Christianity and biblical or Judaism together into one class. It's not so controversial anymore today, but then you can see how the field also has developed over time. And these theoretical discussions, phenomenology, historical, and how do you compare religions, which is of course an important question, were very interesting at the time, and not just one-sided phenomenological heritage.
That means a young student like yourself in your 20s experiencing this transformation discussion process in the universities in Germany and abroad. What did it do with you? How did you come out of this process? Well, we know how important you became later in Bremen with Kippenberg. We will come to that. You are one of the most important guys in Religionswissenschaft who is responsible for the modern actual today's approach. But in those days, you didn't know that you would become a professor, and you didn't know that you would go to Amsterdam. You didn't know that you would go to Groningen. So you were in the situation where I was in 2005 till 2011. I had to decide, what do I think? Well, I decided I'll go back to the old people. I like Otto, I like Eliade, and I'm a phenomenologist, if you like. And I confess it because I'm not in a career where it is dangerous to confess this. How dangerous was it in your studies for the professors to confess phenomenology? Did this end their careers in those days?
I don't think so. In those days, there were many people who were actively phenomenologists.
Okay.
I had more problems being not one, I think.
Okay,
I'm
so
very
so let
critical of
let's let
that.
let's stop. You were not,
No,
you didn't become one, and that
no.
is the seed for your further activity later on. We come to that later. So that is very important. Do you remember why? Because if you take this book, it's not so far away from Otto and Eliade.
I think it's miles away, but I mean, we can talk about it.
Ah, okay,
My
okay,
my my
okay.
my approach
Okay,
is a historical approach, and I don't categorize the sacred or the holy or some divine thing that is not materialized or that is some transcendent. These are speculations I don't find very useful in an academic context.
okay,
And and at the time already, I had some discussions with my instructors in Bonn
okay,
about these questions. And because at the time, I was very much influenced by Richard Rorty's philosophy. So this is pragmatism, pragmatic philosophy, also in a particular direction with Richard Rorty. very much critical of anything, also in terms of philosophy, not just religious studies, but in philosophy, any claim of truth, and that our image of the world is a reflection of how the world really is. This is a distorted understanding. So I was at the time critical of this more realist understanding. History is just telling how it was. That's an understanding of religion that or of history as well that still is quite common in large segments of historical research. But to say that stories are histories are told from a particular perspective and also with a particular bias, and we should never claim that there is a objective truth that we represent in our studies. But then going further into what does that actually mean and unpack, does that then mean that everything goes? No, there are different ways of being accountable as a scholar of religion, but we are not accountable because we have access to the truth. We are accountable because we have to put our sources open on the table, and others have to be able to check those arguments. And that is also a problem when you come with when you argue with some category like the sacred or the divine or the fascinosum with then you run the risk of claiming something that others cannot check. And therefore, I don't find that very useful as an academic approach.
Okay, so every study ends sometime. How did you get this theme for your MA? Was it your idea, or did somebody suggested it to you?
Yeah, that's an interesting also how things come together in personal journeys. I was interested in astrology early on. I had my birth chart read when I was 18 in Oldenburg by an astrologer. And since then, I was interested somehow in astrology. And the professor I already mentioned, Karl Hoheisel, was interested in esotericism, which also includes astrology. And like I said, he did this research and classes on magic in biblical context and so on. And that also wasn't far away from looking into astrology in biblical context. And the other important professor for me was Johann Meyer in Bonn, where I studied Jewish studies. Um, Johann Meyer is one of the major experts for the Dead Sea Scrolls, but also for Jewish mysticism and Jewish Kabbalah. And in Cologne, where I studied with Johann Meyer, we did classes on Jewish Kabbalah and read the Talmud and various also Kabbalistic sources, some of them at least. They're very hard. But I was introduced to that, and these two supervisors of my master's thesis were ideal to look into astrology then in this early Jewish period and the biblical period and in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I had a very good support for these topics with these two professors.
And who did suggest the concrete thesis theme? Was that you, or were your professors saying, do this sort of research?
That was my suggestion, and
Okay,
then you work it out with the supervisors somehow to
okay, okay.
concretize the research question and so on. And yeah, and then yeah, but the idea came basically from my side. Yeah.
And that was published with Peter Lang, and it's 220 pages. And then something happened like a volcano. You worked on a PhD, and this one I have here, and to show it to the viewers, this is not 220 pages, this is 1,000 pages somewhat. Um, okay, I understand that you wanted to do a PhD. Why did you want to do 1,000 pages?
Oh, that was not the initial plan. And today, I mean, I'm a supervisor of PhD thesis these days myself. I would not advise someone to embark on a project like this. It was basically too large for a PhD. But
You could say that.
yeah, yeah. And you could say, okay, well, limit it to the Jewish discourse or the Christian discourse, but doing both, and then also the Gnostic and Manichaean and all these in-between religious communities that somehow, yeah, are important for the Jewish and Christian, but are also not exactly the same. Yeah, be a little bit more concrete, but also in the beginning, and both my supervisor Hans Kippenberg and myself were not sure. We're not expecting this avalanche of material that comes down when you start poking the historical material. Then the avalanche comes, and there's so much. Available, and so much then you which you have to include or feel like you have to include. And it starts already with also with the justification, the methodology to even explain why it is worth looking into astrology in this context, because you work against so many biases, historical biases and scholarly biases. There's basically not a scene in scholarship that's really looking into astrology, and therefore you have to and still happens today that you have to justify why it's worth looking into Jewish or Christian astrology, because we know that they are against astrology. They've always been it. There is no Jewish. That's a short book, right? So this kind of and then when you start looking into it, then all these biases break down, and there's a rich material that you need to look at, and then therefore it gets bigger and bigger, basically like a snowball that you start rolling, and then there's so much you include. Okay, but in the end, I managed to do this within the period. Actually, I don't know how I did that, but yeah. So I had like three years to do the study, and these were quite intense years. And then yeah, I was also lucky to have Hans Kippenberg as my supervisor, because he was a very good expert on the more social scientific approach to the study of religion, and how groups make sense of what they are doing. So the more the sociological approach to religion, and also an historical approach. He was very well versed in ancient religion and was interested in astrology and also in magic and other things that were part of religious practice and everyday life, and this blending of different discourses, like the astrological, which is not only religious, but it's all things else as well, how this blends into religious discourse is something that he supported very well.
How did you get from Köln, Bonn to Bremen? There is a gap there. You finished your studies in 1995, and you started your PhD thesis in 1997.
Something like that. Yeah, yeah. We
What was
left.
in what was in between?
Yeah, we left. My partner at the time and I left Bonn after my studies, and I worked in a outdoor store again, but now in Oldenburg.
Okay.
And it was not clear if and that's something that maybe could have been better in Bonn, when so we finished our studies and there was no interest in talking to the students about maybe follow-up studies like PhD or something. There's just nothing. So I was quite, yeah, I didn't know what I would like to do, and I need to earn some money. And I also love the outdoor sector. So that's part of my, yeah, my passion as well,
Did you
hiking,
did you
canoeing.
move did you move to Delmenhorst in those days?
Later, yeah, a few years later, I moved to Delmenhorst. But first, we moved to in the area of just outside of Oldenburg,
I'm
and
I,
I
I-
then
I'm asking because I couldn't remember when we first met personally. Um, I know that I met you after my astrological education with Nikolaus Klein, Esoteric Astrology, and in those days, that must have been in the 90s, at the end of 90s, then when we met.
yeah.
And now we come to the question. I met you because you were in those days, which we are no longer today, I believe, a practicing astrologer in certain schools. I remember that you used some elements of Löber in those days, but I don't remember or what else you had in your tool basket. Can you elaborate how you became a practicing astrologer in those days and why?
Yeah, it was, I mean, my interest in astrology was, of course, also visible in the master's thesis, and I continued. I at the time also think, and I still think it helps if you're a scholar of esotericism, or and a scholar of history of astrology, or the system of astrology, then it is very helpful to know what these people are doing. So to know what astrology entails, and that's actually also one reason why there are not so many scholars of astrology, because when you start diving into astrological theory and practice, you very quickly realize that it is a very tedious work and a very sophisticated study that you have to engage with to even understand the basics of what astrologers are doing or what astrologers have done over the centuries. And um, so that was partly a scholarly interest to actually learn and understand what's going on in astrology, but also a personal. So and that is true for many people who start studying astrology. The further you get into the study, the more plausible it gets, the more interesting, the more, wow, there's something to discover here. There's something in it. And I don't know exactly what it is, but it seems to work. And there are all these experiences of plausibility or evidence or however you want to call that. Maybe we talk about that later a little
Yes,
bit.
yes, we
But
will.
that's certainly something that I also experienced. And so I had a double development in going into astrology myself, studying it, and also studying it from a historical or systematic point of view. And as I said, after I would have liked to do maybe something. That was one option to start a PhD, but of course you need to have funding for that. And that was not very realistic from my supervisors in Bonn. And I was in Oldenburg and then also in Bremen. And then after I worked in the outdoor store, I started working for the adult education, Volkshochschule. I gave classes on history of Kabbalah, history of Judaism, and so on. So I started to lecture a little bit in that context, and I worked full time in a esoteric bookstore. First, first in Oldenburg and later in Bremen, and that was also quite influential because I mean that was kind of field work at the time to really to learn about what's going on in the esoteric scene in the 1990s, and yeah, working there and talking to all these people and also giving lectures there from the point of view of the study of religion. not as a practitioner of esotericism, but I gave classes then or lectures on the Theosophical Society, for instance. So more kind of academic approach to the things, and there people like to hear about that, of course, as well. So it's not so
Yeah, okay.
distinct. And I got into that, and then it developed in the sense that okay, maybe I want to try out to also to practice astrology. And I started then also. I didn't have an official. I'm a self-learned astrologer.
Oh,
Um,
you
but
autodidactisch?
yeah,
Okay.
autodidact, and
Okay.
I didn't have an official diploma or a certificate from the German Astrological Society or something. Yeah.
What would you say were the books which influenced you to create this project? Is called Astrologies in Astrology, and we had a couple of interview partners already, and they have very different astrologies. And I experienced your astrology in Delmenhorst, which was very convincing in those days. For me, it was very interesting. Uh, you must have read Döberne because you practiced it in your delineation for my horoscope. But what else influences did you have? Have you been influenced by Huber, by example, Dane Radja, Liz Green, those people, or was there some traditional aspect which might have been because Project Hindsight was already on the scene? Which what influences did you have with your approach reading books to create your personal astrology? And did that change since the 90s to today? You still do it privately for yourself. You see the scene, you know the astrologies, you speak on the congresses of the German Deutscher Astrologenverband, the German Association of Astrologers. So you are in the scene, you have an anchor on that side. So can you elaborate what you did in those days to start becoming an astrologer and how that changed over the time, and how did you see this massive tsunami of traditional publications on academia, Warburg Institute, Burnett, and Benjamin Dykes, and all these translation projects which came in the 2015 and onwards, and in 2018 Burnett from Warburg and Yamamoto from Tokyo, they published the great introduction to astrology. Did you read all these books? Did you read the Shlomo Sela publications, or did you see it from the distance?
I read a lot, and what was available. I mean, through the work in the esoteric bookstore. I mean, we had access to everything, so that was certainly something. It was easy to get readings, but I really, I mean, Gertrud Hörlimann.
Yes, yes,
That's one of the basic introduction course. It's extremely technical
yes, it
and
is.
very didactically oriented. It's not a fun read to, I mean, it's very, but I think she does a great job in introducing people to the study or to astrological practice. And also she has in the appendix an overview of, she's not dogmatic in, okay, you have to do this, you have to do that, but she also has or invited then other representatives from other schools to say something about their schools and put it in her overview, which I think is very good way of doing it, because like you said, the field is extremely pluralistic. And it was since the 1920s, basically, there was a huge, particularly in the German-speaking areas, there was a huge innovation of astrology in the 1920s. And then after the war, it was then also going on, further pluralization and different schools and so on. And so that was an introduction, and then I read a couple of I read Thomas Ring.
The whole Thomas thing?
Yeah, Thomas Ring is certainly one of my major influences.
How
I
did you experience that? There are people who can't read it, in one interview with Reinhard Stiel about the history of the Chiron Verlag, he said his friend, an antiquar, that you can see in the Thomas Ring books, which he sold as an antiquar, that people read up to page 130 in there. Up till then, there were some notes, and then it stopped. So basically, there are people who stopped reading the rest of the books because it's. Some people say Thomas Ring is unreadable. I don't agree on that. I like his style, but I'm in a minority. Many people don't like his style. How was it with you? Was it hard work, or did you like his style?
I think it's one of the most beautiful books and a work about astrology that I've seen. I mean, he's an artist. Also, he's an artist in words, and he's a painter as well. But also it's not just the language, but it is the approach that he puts forward. That you work with these energies and you describe these energies and how they materialize. You have to find out. It's certainly, and in that sense, Thomas Ring is, even if people don't read him, maybe he's one of the most influential astrologers of the 20th century. And many people have to refer to him somehow. So he's certainly also in the understanding of the more psychological, the limit of interpretation, Aussagegrenze, that he was very strong in, is certainly something that most practicing astrologers, professionals today would endorse. That it's not deterministic, and we have to be very careful with concrete prognoses and so on. But also that how he describes these energies, like Uranus is das Umschwungbewirkende, and these terms, and there's a reason why it's not translated into English so far. It's not the beauty. I mean, you can translate it into English, but it is a challenge.
Okay.
So that was certainly something. And then I looked into different schools, and the Huber school is quite special.
Very special, yeah.
They come up, they invent all kinds of things that are not really
They're very creative and doing things nobody have heard of before.
exactly. And then you just try it out like they do. Also, they try. Okay, now you have the H point or the Alterspunkt thing. Someday you just come up with something, and then you try it out, and then it works. So it is an interesting scene, and but some of that I found very, and still find very interesting to
And
use.
applicable for your practice.
Applicable, yeah.
Okay.
And
How about Hamburg School? Did that influence you?
not really.
Not really, okay.
That's too
How about the psychological movement in general, Dane Radja and then Liz Green and all this C.G. Jung influenced astrology? I realized when I read your Lilith book that you have a very interesting point of view on the historic figure of C.G. Jung and his influence on certain movements. The book was published Lilith book was published first edition 1997. Are you still of that opinion like you put it down on the Lilith book, or did that change?
No, that has not changed in the sense of my knowledge about Carl Gustav Jung is of course much bigger these days than 30 years ago. And your question about the psychological approach to astrology, I think I see the benefits of it, and it works, particularly in contemporary culture. For us, it works very well, and it is also certainly one reason why astrology survived as a very popular practice. One reason is the psychologization of the planets as being transformed into inner persons of our psyche or whatever. And the other is the spiritualization, which comes through like Dan Rudya and also the Theosophical movement. So both these were transforming astrology in a way that made astrology usable and interesting in the context of the 20th and 21st century popular culture. Having that said, the psychologization is not without its problems, and what I wrote in the 1990s about Carl Gustav Jung is basically only stronger these days in the sense that on the one hand he opened up a lot of and I wrote like a few years ago, my book came out about the cultural history of the soul in the 20th century, and there's a whole chapter on Carl Gustav Jung. I mean, he was extremely influential in the sense of particularly outside of the universities, popular culture, and all these alternative therapies and spiritual movements in the 60s and 70s. They are all about Carl Gustav Jung. That is true for the pagan movement, but it's also true for astrological spiritual movements. But it is also limited by some of Carl Gustav Jung's biases, and it's, for instance, extremely gendered.
Yes.
And that was what annoyed me so much when I read.
I can tell when I read your book, I can tell how annoyed you were. This is this is really okay. A last question for your astrology education and your changes of the view of astrology. In 1993, hindsight started, and since that, we have a movement of renaissance of traditional old astrology, Hellenistic and Arabistic astrology. How far did you integrate those texts, those translations, those transference of knowledge into your personal view, how you would practice if you would practice? You don't practice anymore. You don't have clients anymore publicly. You might do it privately for friends, but you don't practice astrology as a practicing astrologer today. But did it still intrigue you so much that you read all those books? Did you read all the Shlomo Selah's books of Abraham Ibn Ezra and all those Ibn Abu Mashar books and Mashallah books and Al-Kabitchi's introduction, all those books? Bonatti, it was by Ben Dykes, was translated into English and all that. And then we have the Lily Renaissance in England in 1985 with the republishing of the Regulus edition and all that. Did you buy those books? Did you read them? Or did you say, okay, I have enough knowledge, I don't need to delve myself into that?
Yeah, these are two different, this question comes up in two different perspectives for me. The one is the historical perspective. And also in 2003, I published the History of Astrology, the first edition.
You mean this book?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And
Okay.
for that research, you need to read all this, of course. And I'm, as a historian, I'm very interested in reading these documents, these primary sources, and to understand. But also from the beginning, I did not claim to be an expert on Indian or Chinese or other forms of astrology that also came out of the Mesopotamian context, but were developed into very different directions. And this history of astrology is also basically Western astrology, so Mediterranean and European, and today also North American, maybe globalized forms of astrology. And in that, but all these sources that you mentioned, even Abu Mashar and Ibn Ezra and all these important scholars were very important for the European or for the Western branch of astrology, and they were bringing forth what we today would call modern astrology. So from an historical point of view, they are extremely important, and I had to, not that I know all of that, but I had to deal with that as a historian. When it comes, and the second angle of this question is what do you practice? What do you apply? And I I practice what most practitioners do today. It's a psychologized understanding of this. There are some techniques you take over from medieval and still do from medieval or early modern Islamic or from Lilly, for instance. All this system of rulers, for instance, of the signs, it's still practiced today, and it goes back to the Renaissance. So that is has brought forth contemporary astrological practice, but it is not really true to the historical sources.
Okay.
It's mixed too.
So basically, what
And
you're
some of
saying.
the revivals that people try to, for instance, work with a sidereal zodiac, for instance, all these discussions about, I'm more taking a historical perspective there and say,
Okay.
okay, the sidereal zodiac hasn't really been used in Europe, and everyone who claims otherwise is exaggerating the case. And I don't have strong opinions about people shouldn't use it, but I'm not too interested in trying out all these.
Okay. When I was talking with Professor Hübner, who is famous for his philological work, we were talking about Dodecatemoria, which is mentioned in Manilius and also in Firmicus Martianus. Do you personally use the Dodecatemoria?
Not really.
Okay,
No.
so back to your career in academia. Now we know enough of your first. Before we continue with your academic career, for the viewers on this special site, which you find on astrotalk.vonabisw.de, there is a special subsite, Talk with Professor Dr. Kocku von Stuckrad, and we come to his post in Groningen later. I put up a playlist because we can't talk about everything because our guests has produced so much information in the world. The best video is the first one with Helena Avila and Luis Ribeiro, and then a very interesting podcast with the professor of Erlangen-Nuremberg, and then his talk on DRV Congress. We come back to this theoretical approach later, if possible. There is a lot of videos you can watch, and I will try not to talk about anything which is in these videos because you can watch that for yourself. Why should we be redundant and talk about this again? This is this first video. You can click on that. Now, there is a very special change in your how famous Professor Dr. Kocku von Stuckrad is, because in Bremen, when he was doing his PhD, he became one of the leading figures together with his professor to change the methodology. There he is. Kocku von Stuckrad has been central to this transformation. He argues that both Religionswissenschaft and religious studies have historically operated with an implicit assumption of what religion is, and so on. How did this work? It's one thing to write a PhD, but it's another to become associated with your professor and change the world, let's put it this way. Because in Religionswissenschaft and in religious studies, Kippenberg and Kocku von Stuckrad are everybody knows you people if he's in the field of religious studies, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. I don't know if we changed the system or had that kind of influence that you described. But we were
Well,
certainly,
it's ChatGPT who describes you as famous. It's not my invention. It's
yeah,
AI. AI. I ask AI, tell me
yeah.
something. How important is Professor Kocku von Stuckrad? And then it came up, Kippenberg and Stuckrad changed the world. That's basically it.
Yeah, that's bless ChatGPT, but anyway, yeah, I mean, we were certainly part of a change in the field of the study of religion. And in Germany, the discussion is also a little bit different than in other countries because you have the different um, competition between theological directions and the study of religion with the state funding of religions and so on. So it's a complicated situation that you don't have in other countries so much, like in the Netherlands, for instance, or in Scandinavia. They are a little bit more relaxed about some of these some of these topics. But it certainly what you already brought up, the phenomenological approach was certainly pretty strong, particularly in the German study of religion. And therefore also the counter movement or the critique of that was also quite pronounced. And this was part of a larger change in the social sciences, basically, at the time, more toward the understanding of, okay, the construction of reality. It's not that what we're doing is measuring reality and presenting reality as it is. And phenomenology means that shines through, the transcendent, the sacred shines through the material, and we can find the absolute somehow in the manifestations of religion. So this understanding was not very popular anymore, and it was more a kind of constructivist approach, the construction of occult realities. And all these book titles at the time were like that people have certain experiences and they use them in a biographical sense to make sense of what they, to religion as a coping mechanism, as a kind of, I put together my own life story and we are storytellers of everything and so on. So the construction of reality was a quite strong paradigm after the 1980s. Thomas Luckmann and all these people, even the titles, the social construction of reality. And that was certainly strong in the social scientific study of religion as well, which was what was taught in Bremen. Not so much in Bonn, where I got my first impression, but in Bremen that was certainly the leading approach. And Hans Kipmerk was one of them, coming from Max Weber and the sociological understanding of religion as Gemeinschaftshandeln, right? Acting in community, and to look at the social dimension of what people actually do and not what they believe, which is something you will never really know, but you can describe what they do and how they make sense of their lives and so on. So there was certainly a strong movement at the time, and for me it was also coming from an angle where I was interested in studying marginalized practices like astrology. It was certainly something that people thought this is just bullshit, and we don't understand why people can believe this. Serious people don't do this. This very strong bias against astrology. But also when we look at my focus of the postdoc period, which was shamanism.
Oh, we come to that.
Yeah, but same thing. I mean, there is real shamanism. That's what the Siberians did, like long time ago, before they were all killed by the colonial people. But there's a we can come to that. But I mean, there's something. And when you study what people today in Germany or in Scandinavia call shamanism and they practice, that is something that is fake. So what I want to say in the methodological perspective, if you're interested in these marginalized practices, where you have to justify yourself even as a scholar to take that seriously, and then put in the box, oh, you are an astrologer, or you are a shaman, or you are something like that. Then it's quite interesting and also helpful to look into discourses, to look into orders of knowledge, basically. These are part of the constructivist approach to reality. So reality is what communities believe what is real. It's more about opinions, it's more about shared opinions. And then it's only one step to a more sociological approach to discourse, where you say, okay, I'm interested in how certain opinions and knowledge in that sense is legitimized, is produced, is also limited. You cannot seriously believe that magic works, for instance, yeah, or something like that astrology is true or whatever, and how these shared opinions in societies and dominant or hegemonic orders of knowledge are legitimized, produced, delegitimized, how they change over time. That is basically what discourse research is interested in. So you don't define religion or astrology or whatever, or spirituality or shamanism, but you look into how discourses on religion are forming in
Okay.
particular context. And
If you
that is very yeah, helpful, particularly not only I would argue for studying these marginalized things, but also understanding religion and changes in religious landscapes in general.
I remember when you presented your first draft of your habilitation schrift in Freiburg at the Bender Institute. We met there. I don't remember why I was there. I was probably there because you told me that you were there and I wanted to go to listen to that.
I remember, yeah.
This Habilitationsschrift, Schamanismus und Esoterik, Shamanism and Esoteric. First question, is it translated into other languages?
Most of it has been published in English as well, but
Okay,
then not as a book, but in
in
articles and
articles.
yeah.
When I read through it, I have to read it more thoroughly after our discussion. I have the impression that you didn't go into participation. How this is German? Teilnehmende Beobachtung is
Participating, yeah. Participating observation.
participating observation. Is my impression correct that you did not go into shamanistic ashrams or rituals or tents in shamanistic surroundings, but that you remained on the ethic. You didn't go emic. You stayed on ethic. Is that correct?
Yes and no. I did not what anthropologists would call field work.
Yes, that's what I'm.
Really
That's
go
what I.
into. But I did my own practical participation, and I participated particularly in the courses of the Scandinavian Center for Shamanic Studies, which is still active. And Jonathan Horwitz, who's like 82 now, he became my main shamanic teacher.
Okay.
And I write that in the book too, but it's not, I report from the, so I learned how to do it. I think that's important in my own understanding as a scholar. I wanna know what these people are talking about. And I recommend this to my students as well. But it's not a method like what anthropologists would do, like spending like 2 years with these groups and then reporting everything. So it's a certain method that you can apply, and I would not claim to have done that, but I have experienced
Okay.
it, and also that my own experience also then, of course, influences my understanding or my interpretation of what's going on. So I have to be open about that as well.
Okay.
Um,
When
but
you
the main focus of that book is more a description of the field, not only of the one school that I've been engaging with, who taught me the practice. But the claim was a little bit broader to say, okay, I want to write something about the general field, how it is,
yes.
how it manifests today in different publications, influential publications. Michael Harner is one of the important persons there, and how influential was that? And then to given religious studies interpretation of that, and that is particular uh, a um, genealogical interpretation of it in the
Yes, it's
sense.
very. I found it very interesting how far back you, especially the natural movement in Germany, was very interesting. Um, when you were habilitated by the University of Bremen, what was your Venia Legendi? Do you remember what it was worded? Your
It was
Venia.
Religionswissenschaft. I have the
Oh,
Venia
a
Legendi
very
for,
broad Venia Legendi.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And now your life changes dramatically because you leave Germany. How did that come about?
Oh, because yeah, first I had a gig 1 year replacement professorship in Bayreuth, and then I got this job in Amsterdam.
No,
So
no, 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 no,
yeah,
no, no, no. This is Jesus, not so fast. This is
but
very,
that was
very
yeah,
interesting. And when I was talking with Professor Hunger yesterday about his career, in those days, the jobs were not announced. You got the job via communication of your peers, and then they say, "Would you like to do that?" And then you did it. How did you get the job in Amsterdam? Because when you got it, the 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 Lehrstuhl was just created basically. The money came from a private fund and trust, and then this institute in Amsterdam was created, and Walter Hanegraaff was nominated and installed, and a year or two, 3 years later, 2 years. When did you go to Amsterdam? 2003.
yeah, yeah.
So
So
that's only
2 years.
4 years. 4 years later, you're the first one of the first generation of this institution in Amsterdam. Did you know somebody there, and they approached you? Was there a public Ausschreibung
Yeah.
offering? How was it?
I mean, it's also in. I would also nuance what you said or what Professor Hunger said about the German situation. I mean, of course, there were Ausschreibungen in Germany too, so public announcements where you could apply for, but there were basically no jobs. I mean, then you have one or two professorships in like 5 years, and everyone who is habilitated applies there. And I mean, it's extremely difficult to land a job in the German system. It's still the case because the German system works with temporary contracts and not with you. Basically, the only way to have a tenured position is to become a full professor, which
Yes,
is basically a privilege that basically nobody has. And the rest is working like I did in a postdoc project for 5 years, funded by
like
the
a
Deutsche
slave, basically.
Forschungsgemeinschaft.
It's slave
And
work.
and then it's exactly, and then whole careers are built on that. It's highly problematic. In the Netherlands, and that's why in Germany only 7% of the academics have a tenured position. This is basically the full professors. And in the Netherlands, we have 82% with tenured positions in academia. And it's a completely different system. You can have what in Germany is Akademischer Rat, and some of these, yeah, they are exceptions, but these are the rules in the Netherlands. So that is something that's really attractive about the Dutch and other systems. It's more nuanced than that, but I mean that is one reason why there actually were positions. And I applied for positions for full professorship regularly, of course, in Germany too. Whenever I sometimes got invited. I think in total, right, until now, I was like 15 times shortlisted in Germany.
Oh, okay.
And I never made it to. And one of the reasons was that sometimes I heard that too, that oh, it is impossible to have an astrologer as a scholar or as a professor of religion. I actually heard that that people said that. I mean, it's not so easy to be accepted as someone who studies astrology or shamanism. Certainly in those days has changed a little bit over the years. But anyway, so I had this professorship in the guest professorship. For a replacement for Christoph Bochinger, who also did his PhD on the New Age. and was professor for contemporary religion there. And I replaced him for a year after my habilitation. And that was good on my CV, basically, if I would then apply in Amsterdam for esotericism and New Age and all that context there. And my habilitation was published in the book series that also was run by the Amsterdam chair.
Oh, the
Homeland.
Gnostica, the
Yeah,
Gnostica.
Gnostica is a series that Wouter Hanegraaff edited at the time. So
So
there were
that
some,
helped. That helped because
yeah,
he.
that there were some good links on my
Okay.
CD but it was an open application, and then
55 applicants besides yourself, or two?
I don't know, but certainly more than two. I mean, there were many people applying there.
Professor Hübner mentioned when he was applying in Münster, which is a ausgeschrieben public announcement, 18 others were there. So,
Yeah.
okay. So you got the job as assistant professor in a very special institution, the History of Hermetic Philosophy and Related Currents. Professor Wouter Hanegraaff is the full professor. And you started right off because already in 2004, there was a conference in Amsterdam, and you were very responsible for that because you edited the Congress book together with Günter Oestmann and Daryl Rutkin. How did this idea come about? Oestmann told me in a private conversation that the three of you or two of you, I don't know whether Rutkin was in the preparatory course already, but Oestmann and you, at least you discussed who could we invite. Was that a correct story that this very interesting conference was created out of the contacts you had?
Yeah. The nice thing about this Amsterdam context was that the center had its independent budget, and that then there was also some money to organize conferences and workshops and so on. So and then when I came there, I was invited to come up with ideas. And astrology was one idea, of course, and also an important part of the Hermetic tradition, obviously.
But you didn't participate in the Infinite Fire webinars, is that correct?
In the what?
Infinite Fire webinars. I didn't see you there.
No, that was after I left, I think.
Oh, that was after you left.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So back to this conference. This was a very international conference, and I've only one, we don't have the time to go through the whole conference, but the last epilogue, Patrick Curry, The Historiography of Astrology, a Diagnosis and a Prescription. Do you agree with him or do you dissent from his point of view?
I've had changing understandings of this over the years, and certainly at the time, I think the discussion was that we as historians or academics who study, scholars of astrology, should be careful talking about the truth of astrology or the moment, like also Patrick Curry adopted from others, that there is some revelation going on or something. All these, that is more the phenomenological hangover, if you want. Certainly at the time, that there's something sacred happening in the moment. I mean, I can listen to people talk about that, and I can write that down. This is how people experience it, but it is not something I would, as a scholar, use as a tool, as an explanation of what's actually happening. And Patrick is more, or at the time, he also left astrology more or less. He's doing other stuff now. Also, I quite resonant with what I'm doing today as well. It's interesting to see these two careers also going like in parallel waves. Also, like he's doing critical post humanities and all these things, ecofeminism and stuff that's more interesting in other contexts and not so much for or only indirectly for astrology. But anyway, so I would say that as a scholarly interpretation, there are risks of doing what he did at the time.
And last question for your Amsterdam turn. Did you attend the first conference of the Sophia Center in June 2003 in Bath? Have you been there?
No, I've been to Bath, but not to this particular conference.
So
No.
you wouldn't have listened to Geoffrey Cornelius on the verity and the question of primary and secondary scholarship in astrology. Are you familiar with his approach? Basically, he said something like you did yourself personal. He said basically, if you do research on the history of astrology, you should know how to do it. And so he recommends what you did personally, learn the astrology and then do the research as a historian because you are much better prepared for the research result if you know what astrology is.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
you personally agreed with him because you did it. Would you generalize this approach that every historian of astrology should know how to do astrology before he starts to research?
Um, yes and no. So to some extent, I agree. But more in the sense of it helps your position, it gives you some additional insights or perspectives if you have your own experiences. I would not say that it's necessary. Depends on your research question, basically. You can perfectly fine write a history of something or write a book about certain phenomenon without knowing everything about it. And I would not think, and that's more the Rudolf Otto approach, that if you don't have religious experience, then you can never be a scholar of religion. I would not.
Otto would probably say, if you don't experience the divination in the moment of the delineation with the client, you don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. That would be then the application to the astrological or to
Yeah.
the divination thing. I don't think that this is a useful scholarly approach.
Okay.
At the same time, I also don't think that what some of these realists would say that if you have your own experiences, you're only subjectively exaggerating what you experience, and therefore you're completely subjective and blah blah blah. So I don't also think that having your own experience makes you a worse scholar. I
Okay.
think it's part of the question. A good scholar, in my understanding, is someone who is open about the perspectives that they have. Be that as an insider who knows exactly how it feels to have that moment of something happening in
Well, you mentioned when you were talking about your own experience, you said there is something I can't explain that is close to this problem.
yeah, exactly. So I don't think that you're a better scholar if you have it or if you don't have it. But I think what I expect from good scholarship is being open, being curious about learning, and being also transparent and putting your cards on the table and saying, okay, wow, I have this very weird experience when I look into, for instance, when I do a reading for a person. I can confirm what many people say, that something's happening here, and something that it makes sense that people choose very mystical terms for that, like something sacred is happening, or the cosmos is opening up, or there's some divination, there's some power here in the room that is not only in my preparation of the reading, that is all the rational, there's something irrational happening here. Um, and I think that's what basically most people, professionals certainly, experience. And it would be, in my understanding, academically very um, problematic if you would just be derogative about that or say, okay, this is just, yeah. No, you have to
Would
take
you?
that seriously as a fact. Something is happening. That does not mean that what you hear is the explanation, but it's maybe one explanation, it's certainly one perspective that you have to acknowledge that people experience, and then you can move on from there and try to explain what's going on.
I
And
have the
my
I have the opinion that for a research approach, an academic approach, to research this specific problem, what they experience, I have the feeling it's not researchable.
yeah, to some extent, it's I agree. These are I mean, you can research it, but you cannot quantify it.
Yes.
So with a certain research approach, which is very reductionist and or very um, built on repeatability, built on empirical falsification, all these categories that we know from the so-called exact sciences, also from the social sciences, is not really helpful here.
Okay.
It's very easy. Then I mean, you always just disapprove of disprove of what's going on, but still people experience this, and you still have to take that seriously. And how do you do that? And then there are other ways, like for instance, anthropological fieldwork is a way of doing research about
Okay.
it. Then or other forms. Um, so it's not, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's certainly not the interesting, also not for me, the interesting question is to prove or
Yeah.
dis
Okay.
astrological truth
Yeah.
claim. That's not it, it's yeah.
In 2004, this book was published by Beck Verlag. Is that a lot of work for you to do something like that? Is that a really big project, or can you do this because you know everything, just write it down?
No, it's a lot of work. Yeah, it's a lot of
Okay.
work.
So it was a
But
big, it
also,
was a large project for you.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
We
that
we
was
we
also
we, we
part of
wrote,
the
it's called Kocku von Stuttgart, What is Esoteric, a little history of the occult knowledge by Beck Verlag, which is a very large and famous publisher in Germany. We don't
was
have too
also
much.
translated into English.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, and we don't have much time to delve into this book, so we go straight to the change in your life because you left Amsterdam. Could you have stayed there for life?
Yeah, it was a permanent position, but it was not a tenure track, or it was not a promotion track toward full professor or something.
Okay,
So it was a tenured assistant professorship.
okay.
And and at the time, I mean, the opening in Groningen came unexpected, of course, but and then you're very happy to apply there, blah blah blah.
And
But
you got the job.
yeah, and I got the job.
And
Yeah.
the Netherlands people didn't have the problem with your astrological research like the German people have.
No,
Would you
no,
would
it's
you
much
say
less.
would
Yeah.
you say the Netherlands is better in free thinking than German people are?
I wouldn't say that in general like that, but there are certain topics that are extremely problematic in German discourse, and they are much less problematic in other countries, like in the Netherlands.
And you became a full professor in Groningen.
Yes, yeah.
How many people are under you? How many people do you guide? Those days, and now you have a different job because we come to that new job later. But when you came to Groningen in 2009, secretary, assistant professor, two or three or one, or how many people did they give you?
No, it's not like that in the Netherlands.
Okay.
You don't have a chair like a Lehrstuhl in Germany with
Oh,
with
okay.
with a little kingdom that you have with Ausstattung and everything.
Yes, yes, yes.
No, in the Netherlands you're just a employed staff member, you don't have a team that comes with a position.
How is the hierarchy organized? Somebody has to say what's happening. Somebody has to decide in the end.
Yeah, there's a faculty, and in Groningen there still is a faculty of religion and as an independent faculty.
Okay.
There's a dean, and the dean is the line manager of all the full professors.
And you
Uh,
have been that.
later I was also dean of the faculty for a few years. And so therefore I was then in the role of being the line manager for the professors. And the professors, they are, um, and are, no, the line managers of the other people are usually the department chairs. So it's a
Okay.
different, so they are departments, and I was professor in the
Yes.
department of comparative religion. That was my environment, basically. And there were assistant professors, associate professors, postdocs, and what have you.
Okay. And then
But
you became
it's less hierarchical than in
and then
Germany.
you became something else. You nowadays you don't have to do with students of bachelor and master. You only deal with the higher education level, right?
Oh, if that would be only true. I mean, no, this comes on top of that. No, I still teach bachelor's and
Ah,
master's
okay.
students. And in the Netherlands, you have as a standard, you have 50% of your teaching of your work. So 20 hours if you have a full-time job is for teaching. 40%, so 50% is teaching. 40% is research and 10% is administration.
Ah, okay. And
And I
then this
still have that. So
and
I
this new job is additional job for overviewing the higher class education,
yeah,
PhDs, I mean.
and then you have for the research masters and PhD program, you have a graduate school in
Ah, and
Netherlands.
you are the chieftain of that.
And I'm the director of the graduate school,
Yes.
which means that I have a little bit of reduction of my teaching, but I do my normal teaching in bachelor's and master's. Plus, I'm the director of the graduate school, and right now we have 70 PhD
Okay.
researchers
Okay.
in religion, which is a large group. And I oversee their activities, their training programs, and so on. But I'm not supervising all of them, obviously. Yeah.
Something what intrigued me, you lived in Berlin, but you did this work in Groningen. How did that get together?
Yeah, first I lived, 2009, I moved to Groningen and got that position. And in 2000, what is it, 15 or 14, I moved to Berlin.
But that is
Um,
that Berlin is here and Groningen is there, and the work is in Groningen. How did you manage
Yeah,
that?
yeah, sure. You have to organize. I mean, I don't have to be there every day or every week even, but then can cluster my work in Groningen in a way that it's feasible.
So
Um,
basically, what we call in Germany, my professor Heuningen Hühne was like you. He was Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. He was in Hanover, and the rest he was in Zurich. Something like that.
yeah, something like that. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay.
And it depends a little bit on the period where you
And why Berlin? Why did you move to Berlin? What intrigued you to go to Berlin?
because personal,
Okay, okay, okay.
my partner lived in Berlin, had a job there, and I mean, I like Berlin as well.
Okay,
So,
but this changed.
there's nothing wrong with Berlin, put it that way.
Well, something must have been wrong with Berlin because you changed. You moved to the Eifel, right?
Yeah,
Something.
that's most recent. So after 12 years in Berlin, we move again, and yeah, it's another step, basically in my private life, but also in, the
Okay.
whole environment, which also includes the work. And we moved to the mountain region southwest of Cologne, the Eifel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now we come to recent things of your work. You were talking on the Congress of the German Astrology Association, and you did something. Let's take the video. That's probably the easiest way to approach this. Where did I have my, this must be somewhere here. Okay, here. Okay, this was intriguing, and we will do this for the final part of our very interesting conversation. It's das Wissen der Objekte, the knowledge of the objects. We won't go into the video. I'm interested, how did you get so involved in this? What is intriguing you to do this? What is in the video? People can view the videos, we don't have to repeat it. Why did you change traction again? Because this is very new methodology of science, would you agree? It's very interdisciplinary, it's agency, it's interrelational and all that. How did that come about to intrigue you?
That's part that's part of a major shift in academic landscapes, basically.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm part of that. I'm not the initiator of that, but what you see is that with a emergence of new approaches in the humanities, but also in the interdisciplinary understanding of also the science and technology studies and other interdisciplinary fields, with a rise of what people call the new materialism, for instance, and related understandings. And I was part of that. So I teach method and theory in the study of religion in Groningen,
Okay.
and I'm interested in. I mean, I'm part of the academic discussion, obviously, and what is really interesting to see over the last couple of years is what people in philosophy and anthropology call the ontological turn, which is related to the new materialisms and what I in my most recent work call, and others as well, but I joined that conversation recently as well, speak of a relational turn. And there's a bottom line, and there's a common denominator of all these new orientations that also even goes back to the question we had earlier with the divination, with what's actually going on there when you're in the situation of interpreting a birth chart together with another person, or if you're in a ritual with shamanic spirits or something, and something's happening, and something, right? And everyone who does that has these experiences, like pagan rituals. You do the circle, or you do a certain ritual, and then the raven comes closer and has an opinion or whatever. So there's all these non-human factors somehow. And in the old paradigm, which we inherited basically from early modern and Enlightenment philosophy, is that there is a strict distinction between me as the subject and the object I'm studying. There's a very strong distinction between that. And a very strong distinction between the human and the non-human, or between matter, the material world, and mind, or the intellect, and so on. Consciousness cannot be materialized in the plant, and all these distinctions are so strong that people talk about binaries. This is a very strong binary thinking that is part of particularly European heritage and ontologies. And now what's happening over the last 20, 30 years, and that's what we call the ontological turn or the relational turn, is that we say, okay, wait a minute. It's not so easy. And there's, like in biology, for instance, there's intelligence outside of the human brain. Plants and other animals and even fungi are acting actively in conversation with each other and taking decisions all the time, and so on. And that understanding of life on this planet is only possible if we look at life and ecosystems as ecologies of agency, basically. And we are only one part. We are only one part of that. And that is what the relational turn entails. And I mean, there are many ways of going about it. But the intriguing part of that is that it seems to come out of a frustration that we feel, and also an alienation of the human from the rest of the living world. And if you look into the history of this thinking, and that is my most recent book, which was published in German, Nach der Ausbeutung, but the English will come out in January, I think, in After Exploitation. That's the understanding of that book, is to see, okay, the heritage of this this thinking, this binary thinking, is very European, and it has to do with the strong distinctions. And it is also the thinking that legitimizes exploitative regimes, particularly colonialism, capitalism, but also patriarchy. And these regimes of exploitation are based on a certain mindset, which we can call this binary, or what Bruno Latour calls the Great Divide, right? And Bruno Latour was one of the thinkers who were very important to understand this heritage of this thinking.
And this book is in English available?
Sorry?
This is in English available too?
This will be, will come out with Equinox Press in January, I think. Yeah.
And another project was this one, Cultural History of the Soul. This is the English edition.
Yeah.
What's the impetus there?
It's a similar approach than in other publications of mine, because I'm interested in contemporary spiritualities. And these spiritualities, both astrology, but also shamanism, earth-based spiritualities, are extremely popular, and nobody really studies them, right? But astrology, for instance, in Western Europe and North America, is more popular than Christianity. And look at all these studies of Christianity. Oh, this is a thing we have to take seriously. But give me a break. People are much more interested in tree consciousness, or in astrology, or in reincarnation, or in some other things. And we need to devote more scholarly energy on that. And the reason why it is not studied is also because it is not part of our it's not on our radar, because we are also part of this order of knowledge that thinks that astrology is just for idiots, or shamanism is for some derailed individuals who lost their way or something. In not the indigenous one, but when people in Northern Europe or in Western Europe start doing that, then it's quite kind of problematic. But in fact, it's one of the strongest growing spiritual practice, not only in Europe and North America, but worldwide. What Bron Taylor calls the greening of religion, or similar ideas about religion and ecology. And of course, it has a lot to do with the climate crisis, with the mass extinction of species, with a complete plundering of the planet by capitalism, extractive capitalism, and so on. The sense of urgency is very strong, and then it's not surprising that people look at, okay, what are the legitimization? What is the philosophical, intellectual legitimization, also the religious legitimization of these exploitative regimes? And that is a strong, to come back to the question, what is the soul genealogy here? If you look at these contemporary spiritualities, how strong they are, you can also reconstruct their prehistory in European contexts. It's not only that we have to look at indigenous contexts, or some non-European philosophies like Chinese philosophy, for instance, which is has been relational for 4,000 years, and we haven't really taken that seriously. But I mean, they've never had this distinction between mind and matter and causality and so on. So they have been working in different ways. But also within European tradition, we have alternatives, and maybe what people study as esoteric traditions is part of that, holistic understandings, monistic philosophies, and so on, that have also been here, particularly, for instance, in the Romantic period, where much of the understandings of nature that we reinvent today have already been discussed as well with Goethe and Schelling and Novalis and these people, if you look at the German context, but also Blake and Shelley and Coleridge and others in the English-speaking world. It has been there already, and part of our work today is also to retrieving some of this cultural heritage that we have in Europe and see how we can back to that.
We are having audio problems. Do you hear me?
Alternatives to exploitative.
Okay, we are getting technical problems. Last question. Why are you today in this institute? The Center for Applied Ecological Thinking in Copenhagen, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Why are you there?
Because it resonates with a lot of my recent work on the relational turn. But why I'm here is because a good friend and colleague of mine is a fellow here, Tim Rudberg, and he is the official fellow here for the Center of Applied Ecological Thinking. And as part of that fellowship, he also can invite me to share my own work here, and we organized.
Last question. The audio is I think we should be careful to come to a closure.
I'm very glad about that. Mm-hmm.
I think the technical problems are rising, so not to risk anything. Did I miss Did I miss to ask you something important?
Yeah.
Did I miss anything to ask you?
No, I don't think so. We covered a lot. And I wouldn't know what important things is missing.
We didn't talk about your political activism. People can read about that. It's on the page, so we don't have to talk about you have been in a party in Germany, and you might still be there, so people can read that. So for the moment, for the viewers who listened up till now, we thank Professor Kocku v.Stuckrad for taking the time to talk to us, and I personally thank you very much for doing this. Thank you, and for the viewers,
thank you. It has been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, and for the viewers, danke fürs Vorbeischauen und auf bald, and I stop the recording.